the substance that they entangled themselves with, it killed them.
I'd wake up in the morning feeling ill when I didn't have it. It was something that I had to get in order to actually feel normal.
Any overdose death is preventable.
It's an epidemic that takes thousands of lives in the bi-state every year, fueled by an increasing supply of fentanyl.
We're seizing record numbers in St. Louis.
What's happening in the overdose crisis is a symptom of a broken society.
If we pay attention, it's all around us.
Fentanyl is still the greatest threat the DEA has ever seen.
We've launched and fought a war on drugs and drug users.
Do something about this thing that continues to take lives. Thousands and thousands of lives.
Thank you for joining us for this special edition of First Alert 4 at 6:30, Combating a Crisis. This week, if you've tuned in with us, we have been working to shine a light on a substance that's killing more than 150 people every single day. The fentanyl crisis is impacting every zip code, every neighborhood, tax bracket, race, and age group. It knows no bounds. And there are many of those who are children. They come across that deadly drug by accident. All of that, focusing on the now dire need to change lives, save lives, is why we're hosting this very roundtable tonight. Everyone here with me has either been directly impacted by fentanyl or is working to actively stop and slow the problem in our region. We're going to start here with Justin Smith. You are a current survivor of this, in recovery from fentanyl addiction. Start by telling us about what the start of your addiction looked like and what your struggles were.
So the start of my addiction started at an early age because of some childhood trauma and eventually led into fentanyl addiction in my 20s. I had been hospitalized with a MRSA staph infection and got exposed to opioids as a painkiller, and then was released, and quickly after I started having symptoms of withdrawals that were unbearable and quickly resorted to getting heroin that eventually was being laced with fentanyl.
And we know that a lot of times the opioid problem starts with doctors prescribing it and not providing then the appropriate recourse for you. What was that process like for you?
So whenever I was hospitalized, I didn't get weaned off of the Dilaudid that I was on for 28 days. So within 12 hours of being released, I was in withdrawals and quickly resorted to go into the streets to find something that would relieve that pain.
What is that pain like for anybody who's never been through it?
So the withdrawal pain for me was very excruciating. And at some point, I actually attempted suicide because of the pain I was going through. I couldn't get up in the morning without having it, couldn't get to go to work without making sure that I had my fix in order to get through the day.
For you, what was the turning point in you committing to sobriety?
The turning point in my addiction was when I lost my son because of my addiction. That was my turning point. That was whenever I kind of just a light bulb went off and said, I need to get help.
Kind of shook you.
I can't do this on my own. I've tried many times. So I reached out to a foundation here in St. Louis called ACPD, and they helped me get to West Virginia to get the help I needed.
And this isn't something you picked up on your own, obviously. This was something that you were prescribed, essentially, and then continued to try and, what's the word I'm looking for? Try and satiate. So my question is then, what is that like for you to know that this wasn't your choice? A lot of people think that it is a choice.
And I guess, in a sense, it was my choice in order to continue to go out, but essentially, I didn't choose to get prescribed the Dilaudid while I was hospitalized. I didn't choose to have to go through the withdrawals, and it continued to progress throughout the years.
And became an addiction eventually. All right, turning now to Pamela Paul. Pamela, we know that you have lost several family members to fentanyl addiction. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Yes, well, I had a young cousin, and I got a call from relatives that said she was in a situation that they thought she needed help, and I was already working in the area. And so when I got to her, she said that she admitted it, and she was a really great mom, and she said she couldn't even get up and take care of her kids in the morning, like she used to. And so that really bothered her. And I offered her, every harm reduction tool, the opportunity to go to treatment, different things like that, and she just wasn't ready. So she ended up overdosing, And then my nephew, Travion, a very nice young man. He loved his music, and his mom was very enamored by him. He was her only child, and he started using. I didn't know he was using, and he had been hospitalized for a little while. And when he got out of the hospital, he used again, and he overdosed, you know. And these things are really textbook. It goes like that. If you abstain, you try again, your chances of overdosing are highly increased, you know. And not just them, but my brother, my big brother, Corey, you know. He had a situation with the law. And so he ended up having to go to prison for 6 months because he had dirty urine, you know. And when he got out, he got with my cousin, and they went somewhere. They went to a little fancy place and thought they were having a wonderful time. They were using, you know. When he came home, my cousin says how he was leaning and he couldn't really walk, and you know that isn't really my brother's posture at all. And he and his girlfriend, my cousin and my brother's girlfriend, took him in, laid him down, and she talked about how all night long that my brother kept fanning, you know, for help, but she didn't know what was happening. And in the morning, she called me and she said, well, you know, Pam, I don't know what's wrong with him. I can't hardly wake him up. His fingertips are blue, his fingertips are purple, you know, and all I could do was just yell and say, please, you know, call 911, call him right away.
You knew?
Yeah, and my hopefully final family member, my son, Brian, you know. I raised Brian to be a nice young man, you know, respectable in every way, and somehow, you know, the substance use disorder got to him. And he had come home to visit me, and I could tell he was, you know, not right. And before I could say anything, he said, Mom, can I just come back home? I want to go to treatment. I want to get myself together. Yes, this is a great day. And I said, sure, you can come home. You could, you know, stay in the basement. It's yours. We're going to keep going, and you're going to be okay, you know? And he purchased drugs before he left here. He went back home to Kansas City, and he used them. And that's another thing that happens regularly. If you're using and you switch your supply, you have highly increased your chances of overdosing. And my son Brian overdosed and died, you know?
Heartbreaking, absolutely. I know you've been through that. You're taking that pain and you're now turning it into a mission. We'll get back to that in a moment. But I want to now turn to Rachel Winograd. She's an associate professor at the University of Missouri, St. Louis, UMSL. Rachel, you focus specifically on the study of alcohol and drug use. So I want you to explain how we've gotten to this point where thousands of people in our region are dying every year from a very preventable death.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Thanks for doing this panel. It's really, really important that we talk about this in mainstream settings so everyone has access to information. I think that can be a key theme from tonight. In terms of what got us into this problem, I think an important thing to remember is that people have always used drugs. People will always use drugs. As human beings, many of us have a desire to alter our consciousness in some way. Drink coffee or energy drinks in the morning, maybe drink alcohol. You know, that's not a wild thing.
It's not taboo.
Why do my kids spin in circles to make themselves feel dizzy? Like, it's really essential. So I think this idea that we can stop urge or stop drug use entirely is a fool's errand. So specifically what got us here today as a country, and Missouri is no exception, is what they call the 3 or 4 waves of the overdose crisis. So in the 90s is when we saw a lot of overprescribing of prescription opioids. You know, there was a bigger supply that, you know, got people on these medicines, and then they were yanked away, likely too fast and too suddenly, and exactly what you're talking about, Jordan, but Justin, sorry.
That's okay.
But on like a national scale.
Right.
And then people are desperate and they transition to heroin, and then heroin goes away because we're snatching that off the streets, and there's a real motivation to go to something more potent and more compact, and that's fentanyl, which is much easier to make and sell and transport. And now what we're facing is the 4th wave, which is a combination of stimulants and benzodiazepines and xylazine and fentanyl and all sorts of other drugs. So What we're not seeing is that a bunch more people are using drugs. About the same number of people are using drugs, but the drugs that they're using on any given occasion are much more deadly.
Which is heavy to think about, absolutely, because there's really no way to combat that in the moment at all. Okay, we're going to get into some of those ways that we can combat this crisis here in just a moment when we come back. Welcome back. Before we get into the tools to fighting the fentanyl crisis here in our region, I want to bring in Michael Davis. He's a special agent in charge of the DEA here in St. Louis to talk about how this drug is flowing through our communities, how much is coming in, and how that has changed over the last few years.
So our drug market and our communities are being flooded with illicit fentanyl. This illicit fentanyl, it's a synthetic opioid. It's 50 to 100 times more powerful than morphine. Now, to most people, you would want to stay away from a substance like that. But unfortunately, we have drug traffickers and some people that abuse drugs who they're drawn to that drug. Of course, the drug traffickers, they're in it for the money. They know if they put that substance on the street, people are going to abuse it, get addicted, and they're going to continue to come back. DEA, we're focusing on two main cartels, the Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco cartel. Those two cartels are producing this fentanyl in Mexico and, of course, getting it to the United States for further distribution. One of the other reasons that this drug is so powerful and so deadly is that it's being mixed in with other drugs. Cocaine, crack cocaine, methamphetamine, and heroin. It's being mixed in, so the users have no idea. In some cases, they have no idea that they're using fentanyl. They think that they're, let's just say, getting some cocaine, but it's actually cocaine laced with fentanyl. And when that happens, of course, you hope that it's not a lethal dose in that, in that particular batch, and which is only 2 milligrams,
right.
Enough to fit on the tip of a pencil.
Right, and that's the thing, where it's the tiniest amount of this drug, the most minute, can be deadly. And if you don't even know that you're taking it, then you're also in a position where you're getting addicted to it and don't even know often. So I now want to bring in Nicole Dossi, rather. She joins us now from Prevent Ed. It's an organization that helps to prevent the harms of drug and alcohol use. And Nicole, Prevent Ed does what's called primary prevention. Walk us through what that looks like and how it's being implemented and what role it plays in preventing fentanyl.
So first and foremost, this is primary prevention.
Okay.
Exactly what we're doing
Great.
tonight. And this is why we're so excited to have 30 minutes of basically primetime television to talk, to educate, to increase awareness. If we can have one family sitting in their living room tonight going, I wonder what that person is doing, or I wonder what this person is feeling, or I wonder how we could prevent that in our family, or maybe that's what that person is going through. That's primary prevention. It's education and it's conversations. What primary prevention is it's not law enforcement, it's not treatment, it's not necessarily harm reduction. It works alongside all of those other things as well as recovery to get ahead before anything happens. As Dr. Winograd said, drug use is not higher than it's ever been before. Actually, amongst young people, it's at historic lows, which is a huge win. So primary prevention is getting upstream before anything happens, talking to kids like when Justin was little, who experienced trauma, because we know life's hard, right? And so when we can start talking to kids beginning in kindergarten, not about fentanyl, but about coping strategies, decision-making, handling uncomfortable feelings. What do you do when you have those feelings? Who are grown-ups you can talk to about those? We are not suggesting that we're going to prevent drug use from ever happening ever again. But if we can just plant the seeds and cause people to go, that's primary prevention. And it lasts all the way up until kiddos are in middle school, high school, college, causing them to really pause and think before they make a decision. And as really important in what we've talked about before, not putting blame or casting judgment or saying, oh, well, good families don't do this, or that's a morality thing. There's no room for judgment in this fight. I think we all can agree on that.
It affects everybody.
Everyone.
Right. And that's where this type of access and
That's
this type of information is so important. All right, we're going to put all of this into action, get you some tools. Still ahead after the break, a look at the major obstacles in the way stopping preventable deaths. We'll be right back. Welcome back. When looking at the fentanyl crisis in St. Louis, there are a number of obstacles holding the region back from ending the problem. The first step in overcoming anything is recognition. So I'm going to open up this next question to Michael and Nicole. Talk us through some of what are the barriers that you're seeing in lowering overdose deaths. You want to start?
Yeah.
Michael, Rachel?
Go for it.
Okay, I'll go ahead. Well, one of the barriers that we see is that we've noticed that certain law enforcement agencies and local coroners still classify these drug-related deaths that we're getting every year as accidental. Okay, and unfortunately, when it's labeled as an accidental death, it's in the past it's not investigated. So the person responsible for those deaths are, of course, getting off scot-free. They're not being held accountable. No one is actually investigating the case. So here recently, in the past year and a half, we initiated Operation OD Justice, and that's a way to educate, train our law enforcement partners and local coroners, county coroners, on how to investigate these cases. Because what we want to do is hold individuals accountable for preventing the deaths. You know, that person was someone's son, daughter, mother, father. And so we want to hold those individuals accountable. And so that's one of the hurdles that we've been experiencing.
There's also so much shame and stigma still surrounding substance use disorder. There's so much judgment. There's a lack of education. I mean, there's still the misconception that if you intervene when someone's experiencing an overdose, that you don't want to get too close because you could potentially be exposed to that drug. That is just not factually accurate. We also know that there are areas of our city and our area that do not have the resources, particularly in communities of color, and that's really not okay. With primary prevention, we know that people don't understand it. They want instant gratification. They want a quick fix. Primary prevention for kids is the long game. It's building skills now so that we see the fruits of our labor in 20 years. Funding is an issue. But I think that just generally when we're talking about a lack of understanding about what it is, that sure, it might begin with a choice to take the prescription drug or to be prescribed it or to take the bump of cocaine or something. But then at some point in time, the brain physiologically changes and that person needs assistance and support and unbiased listening.
Okay, and Rachel, I'll bring you in on this question then. What are some of those tools that people can implement that we have today in order to combat this crisis?
Okay, a lot to unpack here. I'll answer your question.
Where do I start?
So when it comes to getting people access to treatment and recovery resources broadly, it's really, really important that people have options and choice and information and that there are many paths to recovery. That being said, when we're talking specifically about reducing risk of fatal overdose, we really have two big tools in our tool belt. That is naloxone. Thank you, Pastor Pam. Naloxone is a life-saving miracle. You squirt it up someone's nose, or if you have the injectable form, you stick it in a big muscle, and it literally saves a life in the moment. Our team works tirelessly to get naloxone into every corner of this state. Now, that is a life preserver. That is like the last option to prevent death in the moment. Looking back from that, the other big tool we have are medications to treat opiate use disorder. Specifically, two main medications, buprenorphine and methadone, are shown to reduce risk of death by 50 to 80%, which is bananas. That is such a high number, and it's so hard to get these medications still. Even with all the innovation and funding and tireless effort of treatment providers across the state, what we need is everybody stepping up. This is not, this is not my problem, this is not my specialty. This is a all hands on deck, get on board. If you come in contact with people who use drugs and might need help with addiction, which is really almost everyone, then you should know how to talk about it. You should know how to offer help. And Last, I will just respectfully disagree that we should be prosecuting overdoses as homicides. I think that's going in the wrong direction, and it's an extension of our drug war, which honestly has not helped. It's made things worse. I think we should be leaning toward compassion rather than punishment.
Okay, we will dive more into this. We'll have some final thoughts when we come back. Welcome back. We're going to wrap up this really insightful conversation about the fentanyl crisis in the region. I want to bring back in Justin. You have been part of the worst part of this pandemic, or this epidemic rather. For people at home who may know someone that's struggling or be in addiction themselves, what are your parting words for them?
I would just say to them that it's best to really be compassionate and supportive of their loved one rather than trying to be judgmental about their addiction. I got that a lot from friends and family, and it was very
disheartening.
Disheartening for me, and it kind of kept me in my addiction longer than what I probably could have been if people were more just compassionate and more supportive in trying to find a solution rather than just placing blame, saying I was the problem.
A lot of understanding goes a long way, certainly. So we want to bring in and talk about some of the resources that we have. We have those resources posted on our website, firstalert4.com. You can also find them on our First Alert 4 app. We also were able to highlight Pastor Pam last night and her motivation and what she's doing on the ground in the community to make a difference. You can find that on our website as well. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. We hope you learned something. We'll see you.